Hi friends, I'm Corey Miller, President and CEO of Ratio Christi. Many of you may not know this, but I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. Having grown up in Utah as a Mormon, this is now very personal to me. I was a seventh generation Mormon with my ancestry going all the way back to 1836. They knew, they talked with, they walked with, they ate with Joseph Smith, Brigham Young. Most of the early Mormons were people that were part of their neighborhood, part of their community. They were engaged in polygamy, and my ancestor was a bodyguard of Joseph Smith. I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I never knew Jesus. I never understood grace. This is historic Nauvoo. This is Young Street right there where Brigham Young lived. And over here, Water Street is where my ancestor John Scott built his home right next to Joseph Smith's home. Baptisms for the dead, ordinances of the temple work were and are facilitated in this building. This is the home where Joseph Smith first dictated the instructions for proxy baptism for the dead and many of the ordinances for the teaching of the LDS Church. After Joseph and Hiram Smith, his brother, were killed in Carthage to answer to charges for destruction of the Nauvoo expositor, their bodies were brought back here by my ancestor John Scott, one of his bodyguards and a colonel in a Mormon battalion, and laid to rest until they were sent to the burial down the road. So this is the Smith family cemetery. After Joseph Smith's body was taken back to his home, they finally put the bodies here in this plot of land. So this is the home of Heber C. Kimball. He was one of the original 12 apostles, and he was the first or second counselor of Brigham Young. One of his grandchildren was Spencer W. Kimball. I used to sing songs about Spencer W. Kimball in Sunday school. The headquarters of the Nauvoo Legion, where John Scott, my ancestor, was a colonel in that militia. At one point, it was 3/5 the size of the U.S. Army under James Buchanan. This is moving into the historic district of Nauvoo, Illinois, where most of Mormonism really resided after they left various other places from where they felt like they were being persecuted. And this is the famous city, the Beautiful, where Joseph Smith led the Mormon people until he got taken to Carthage, Illinois, in jail where he was killed. This was the Mormon newspaper in Nauvoo, Illinois from about 1838 to 1846. There was a competitor, and that newspaper was the Nauvoo Expositor, which had one solitary volume and number, and it was designed to expose Joseph Smith by some of the highest ranking leaders in Mormonism. William Law, who was the second counselor to Joseph Smith and didn't appreciate when Joseph Smith began not only to take other men's wives for his own, but had a revelation that William Law's wife was supposed to be one of them. And that began one of the first splinter groups in the whole Mormon saga. And my family was involved and was split up by that because William Law actually baptized most of my family. And so most of the family went the Law direction and went along with them with this newspaper. And Joseph Smith didn't appreciate that as mayor of the council at the time. Went and sent people to destroy the printing press at the Expositor, upsetting the rest of the community, the non-Mormon community. So that's what led to Joseph Smith eventually going to jail in Carthage, Illinois. So that White House you see down there is Joseph Smith's mansion. And this plot right here on Water and Hyde was actually the bodyguard, one of the bodyguards of Joseph Smith, who was John Scott, and that was my ancestor. He was a colonel in the Mormon Legion, and had 5 wives, 36, 37 children, of which I'm a descendant, and left his family to stay faithful to Joseph Smith when most of the family who were baptized by William Law, the second counselor to Joseph Smith, they left and started a new movement, but John Scott continued being faithful to Joseph Smith. After Smith died in 1844, he began reporting directly to Brigham Young, and then ended up going to Salt Lake City, Utah. This is a surreal moment for me, coming to Nauvoo and Carthage, Illinois for the first time. My ancestors were converted from Scottish Presbyterianism to Mormonism in 1836, 6 years after the publishing of the Book of Mormon. My ancestor John Scott was a bodyguard of Joseph Smith, a colonel in the Mormon battalion in the Nauvoo Legion. And this is the Carthage jail where Joseph Smith died, fell out of the window just on the other side of that upper room there. He was shot to death, of course, as the nice missionaries that we just had a delightful discussion with conceded. Joseph Smith did have a 6-shooter with him, so whether he's a martyr or not is a different question, but he did have his life taken, and I don't know that I would justify the mob coming in and doing that, but I can understand some of their fears, as Joseph Smith was running for president of the United States at the time. He was busy assigning other men's wives to be his own. After Joseph Smith died here, June 27th, 1844, my ancestor John Scott was one that came and took his body back to Nauvoo, where he and his brother Hiram are now buried. Hiram's son Joseph Fielding Smith, the 6th prophet of the Mormon Church, and John Taylor, who was in that upper room and shot along with Joseph Smith, both of those two presidents of the Mormon Church, the 3rd and the 6th president, gave testimony and words at my great-great-grandfather's funeral in Utah, who began reporting directly to Brigham Young right after Joseph Smith's death. So my family was deeply entrenched all the way to the very first decade or so of the origins of Mormonism. In our delightful conversation with some missionaries here, who happen to be from Utah, ironically, I shared with them how I am the first to defect from that early defection from Protestant Christianity, and the first to come back to the true gospel of the biblical account, that you are saved by grace through faith, that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. We were created under the production of good works, but we don't get to heaven by those good works. Both of these nice Mormon missionaries are aging, and they could not have confidence that when they die, they would know that they go to be in celestial glory with Heavenly Father. They couldn't know that because they're not trusting entirely in the gospel of Jesus. They don't have the testimony of Jesus, who said in his last words, "It is finished," on the cross. And there's only two kinds of people in the world. There's the done and there's the doing. For the done, it's just trust, and if you really do trust, your life's going to look like it. For the doing, they're still trying. But the sad thing is, they're gonna meet against the judgment of God because they did not trust in the Christ of God. So we're called to love the Mormon people, who are very well intended. Sorry, I've got a bug there. Are very well intended, nice people, can be great neighbors, but these people are deceived, maybe self-deceived, by a man who led people astray from the true gospel now for almost 2 centuries. We are called to love the Mormon because Jesus died for the Mormon people, that they might have life through what he accomplished on the cross, and said, "It is finished." Mormons are a feeling people when it comes to religion. I've got a PhD in philosophical theology, and so I put more premium on truth than I do on feelings, but I think feelings can be legitimate. I saw Mormons inside here weeping, tearing up, something I was accustomed to growing up and hearing testimonials in Sunday school in the Mormon church. But we also saw fundamentalist Mormons, all dressed in the same outfits. You could tell they were polygamist families. My ancestor was polygamous, had 5 wives and 36 or 37 children, of which I'm a descendant. You saw other Mormons that were members of the Community of Christ, or what was originally the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that after Joseph Smith's death, his son, Joseph Smith III, and his wife went a different direction. There were all these different splinter groups. It was surreal in that for 7 generations, my family had been led astray by a man who went into a grove, into a wilderness experience. And as the story goes, he saw God and Jesus, who said that you're not to join any of the other sects, for they're all apostatized. They've all apostatized. They've all been led astray. And now the irony is you have, in just this encounter here, these numerous sects of Mormonism that we have actually met with and seen that they all have testimonies that they bear with great, phenomenal tenacity. But that is not the same, it is not to be confused with veracity. And I can't help but feel compassion for all of these people, regardless of nearly 400 different Mormon sects since Joseph Smith's death, that they are zealous for God or for their religion, but not according to knowledge. Similar to what Paul says about the Pharisees in Romans chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. So this gives me a heart of compassion for the Mormon people. We want to reach these people because they're people for whom God sent forth his Son into the world to die for. I really want to reach the Mormon people. I've co-authored and edited one book, Leaving Mormonism, Why 4 Scholars Changed Their Minds, co-authored with a BYU scholar, ex-BYU scholar. Another one is Engaging with Mormons, that helps you understand their psychology and sociology, not just their doctrine and theology. But this third one that I'm working on right now with some friends is going to be an absolute bombshell. It's being written by a pastor of a church in Utah, a friend of mine, along with 5 ex-Mormon missionaries that are now full-on sold out for the Jesus of the Bible. And they're each going to take one of the chapters in the missionary discussions that 70,000 missionaries hold in people's homes. And they're going to write it now from a Christian perspective, helping Christians understand what to think, how to respond, and how they are going to be expected to feel and respond by those missionaries. So it's really going to be a book to help Christians turn the tide on converting Christians away from Christianity and into Mormonism. Now we got to convert Mormon missionaries to become Christians.